And I thought, this does not look like a children's size 7, 8. So I rang up Claire and I said, what size are Sarah's feet? And she said, why? And I said, I'm at the shop. And she said, which shop? Anyway, none of this was relevant. And she said, they're size 13. And I didn't have a size 13. The highest shoe size they had was 9. I said, I think these shoes are sized by age of child rather than the size of foot. And she said, I've never seen that before. And I said, well, I'll go and ask I'll go and ask the assistant. And I said to the assistant, are these sized by shoe size or age of child? And she said, age of child. And I said, apparently that's quite rare. And she said, yes, in my experience too.
It is.
So just announced them. Yeah.
Well, this is Mark Dapin. And he's just bought some slippers for his daughter for her birthday. Happy birthday, Mark Dapin's daughter.
It's on Sunday.
It's on Sunday. So Mark is a writer. He's also a journalist, and his most recent book is R&R. Give us a one-liner on R&R.
R&R deserves to win the Pulitzer Prize.
I think it does too. Anyway, I'm
this
only laughing because we've been talking Pulitzer. We're also joined by the lovely Toni Jordan.
Hello.
Toni is an Australian writer as well. Her most recent book is Our Tiny Useless Hearts. There we go. Lovely. But Toni came into the book world through Addition.
Addition, my first book.
Her first book. She was a scientist before she became a writer.
This is true. I was a scientist.
Yeah. So she's joining us as well tonight. So we've got the lovely Toni Jordan and the
Lovely.
not so lovely.
The lovely.
And the not so lovely Mark
Pulitzer
Dapin.
Prize winning.
And this is George, if anybody's wondering.
And this is
John Brown.
John Brown.
They insisted on joining us tonight. Now, tonight we're talking about a very, very serious book. The book club book for this evening is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Now, I've got to say it has been one of the most popular books in terms of our better reading community. A lot of people have talked about it. A lot of people have made comments. The better reading team read it and chose it as the book club book. Some liked it, some didn't like it so much. It tugged at my heartstrings, but I want to talk to both of you about it first. Okay, Toni, let's start with you.
All right. Well, I have very definite feelings about this book, Cheryl.
Definite. Okay.
Yes, I would like to split myself now into two people. I am reader Toni and writer Toni.
Okay.
And reader Toni, I loved it. I thought it was engrossing. I thought the setting was amazing.
It's a real page turner.
It really is. I really couldn't put it down. I loved the characters, and the voice of it. I've put little bits in for the sentences I really liked. There was a lot I really liked about it.
He's a really beautiful writer.
Yep.
Yeah.
But writer Toni, I just felt that I was being manipulated. I felt that it was one of those, let's put a child in immediate peril, an extremely vulnerable child at that. There's all these kind of short chapters to keep you on the edge of your seat. I felt.
But didn't you think that was a good technique to keep you?
It's a very good technique.
For me, the short chapters almost made it feel like a thriller in a way.
It's a mystery story. Really,
it is a mystery.
It's a thriller. But I felt that I was being manipulated. I felt there was Anthony back at home, wherever he is going, how can I make people's hearts really rend, like squeezing them? Well, I felt that it was all a bit contrived.
I didn't feel that much. I didn't feel that so much. I really felt that it was a mystery, which came as a surprise to me because I thought it was going to be something a bit different to that. However, I really liked his technique in terms of storytelling. Sometimes where I think it could have been boring, he actually kept the momentum going for me with those short chapter technique, that short chapter technique that he kept delivering on. However, when I finished reading it, I thought, wow, I'm not really quite sure about this. But then when I started to reflect on the characters, I missed them. I liked them. And I really wanted some characters to get together, and they didn't.
Yes.
So that, to me, is often the mark of a good book. I mean, everybody that knows me knows I like a happy ending. Mark, Mark Dapin, what did you think?
I would also like to split myself into two people.
Okay.
But you weren't tempted to split yourself personally?
No,
Right.
no, I'm just one person.
Right. Well, I will be writer Mark and reader Mark. Which one comes first?
Whichever one you like.
No, I want to follow the.
Well,
I want to do the right thing.
I went reader Toni first.
Okay, I'll be reader Mark first. Reader Mark would not have read another book this year, I don't think. Certainly not another contemporary novel. So for reader Mark, this was his first such reading experience, and reader Mark began reading it thinking, oh my God, why am I wasting my only reading time of the year reading a book which is written entirely in the present tense and which includes sentence after sentence which has no verb. But reader Mark took until about page 38 to get over that, and for the rest of it, reader Mark just loved it. Reader Mark found it an absolutely gripping experience, and reader Mark read it in a day, even though writer Mark, his arch enemy as well as his best friend, had a deadline that day, which he made, by the way.
It is
so yeah, as a reading experience, I was absolutely gripped. As a writer, I was full of admiration, not so much for the plotting or the kind of manipulation that you were talking about. I more or less ignored that. It was simply the sentences, that some of the sentences were so beautiful that but it was more than simply artful use of metaphor and simile, although there is a great deal of that. It's the sound of his words. It's a book about sound. Like when I thought it was called, All the Light You Cannot See, I thought, well, it's about nothing then. It's like the sound of silence. What's that going to be about? But in fact, it is about sound.
It is acutely about sound.
If you were to go through that book and pick the number of, I'm going to try and say onomatopoeic and broadcast, the number of onomatopoeic words he uses, including onomatopoeic, 3 times, onomatopoeic words he invents to give various animal sounds, I think you'd find he uses most of them in the English language. I actually looked up a list of onomatopoeic words to see if there were any he did not use. But it's just a remarkable ear for the way that words sound and the way everything else sounds was what impressed Mark Dapin, the writer, known as Mr. Hyde.
Let's talk. Shall we just give a summary of what it's about? Okay. So it's set in France in 1940. Interrupt me, if need be. And it is about a young blind girl who lives with her father, and they are caught in Paris, in an apartment in Paris. They're trapped in an apartment in Paris and they decide to flee because the Germans have just invaded France.
And her father is the locksmith, the lockmaker for the museum.
The Natural History Museum. And so father and daughter, blind daughter, and blindness due to cataract, so she lost her vision at about 6. They flee to Saint Malo in France. Is that right? And they actually hide out with his brother, an uncle Etienne.
His great
uncle.
So her great uncle.
Yeah, his uncle, her great uncle. Beautiful, beautiful character called Etienne.
Yep.
And then we see the Germans invade France and the repercussions that has on these people.
Yep.
This is not just a war story, I thought. But before I go any further, we've got some comments from some of our readers. What have we got?
Fiona wants to know, what did you think the unreconciled characters are doing now?
Well, gosh.
Yeah, so there is a bit at the end that kind of follows them.
Yes.
So that's a really interesting comment because at the end, Anthony Doerr sees into the future, so he quite tight.
And I like that technique.
He closes up a number of them, but there's some that he doesn't close up.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see what happens to a number of those people. But yeah.
Well, I think that she's still running the Natural History Museum.
Yeah.
And Jutta is raising her family.
And Jutta's son becomes a very famous scientist of some description.
Yeah, that's right. We've also got, we had some comments come in earlier. We've got Leanne who said, I knew this was a great book because I was there standing in the pages watching it unfold like it was happening right in front of me. Only a good book can make this happen. It did remind me ever so slightly of The Book Thief.
I agree, and I don't think it was ever so slightly. I think there's something slightly vulnerable child, World War II, mix them together. You know,
it does seem to be a formula for a bestseller, doesn't it?
is.
I think the minute you actually is if there's a bit of Second World War, is if there's a child, that book seems to, I don't know, ignite people's reading passion and you know, catapults that book to a bestseller list, as this has done as well.
Yeah.
Now I'm also going to read Ali. What I enjoyed about this is Ali, one of our readers, what I enjoyed about this book is the storyline, the structure and setting. There's a diamond mystery, and I want to talk about the diamond mystery. There's war, and although the time frame chops around, I always knew where I was because of the short chapter structure. One of the final passages exploring the passing of time, ways we communicate and humanity was just stunningly beautiful. This is a book which will stay with me. And I think that that's true in a way. I mean, there is so much to that book.
Yeah.
There is a mystery. There's the whole diamond chase, which I'm quite confused what happened to the diamond at the end. Did it go off to sea? Or was it still...
Yeah.
Oh, you think?
Absolutely.
You don't think it was in Utah bringing it... Okay, well, that's fine.
No,
I'm a
it's in the
romantic,
sea.
and I like to think that happens.
But it's important that it's in the sea.
It's important.
Because
it's really important.
at the beginning, can I just
sure.
put my little reading glasses on? When they're talking about the diamond at the very beginning, where Marie first hears about the diamond, she asks, "Why not just take the diamond and throw it in the sea?"
Yeah,
and
let's just toss it out once and for all.
And one of the older boys says, "When is the last time you saw someone throw 5 Eiffel Towers into the sea?" Meaning the amount of money it was worth. And I think the whole point of the story was everything those two had been through made them realise that that's worth nothing compared to life.
But also the layers in this book. There was quite a few layers, and kind of, you know, even though there were a few characters, there was a lot of parallel stories running, and I thought that diamond made it a thriller-like, you know. But do you know what I liked about it is that the general, even though I think he was a despicable character who was chasing the jewels, it wasn't for money.
No.
It was for survival.
Yeah, if I, as a reader and a writer, in fact, I concur with myself as both reader and writer, which is good because the man has to live with himself, if nobody else. Were to pick one thing I did not like about the book, it was the Sergeant Major character.
He wasn't great.
I felt like, from his name, was called Von Rumpel or something.
Yeah.
He was there for a comic relief that never actually came. I kept thinking this is going to end in some massive kind of universal joke, but it didn't. And I wasn't particularly interested in a quest for the diamond either. That seemed
So
like
you didn't
a
think that
thriller.
cut sub-story worked?
I just wasn't. I don't care about somebody running off with a diamond. It seemed.
Yeah, it's not necessary to the
I was
plot.
much more interested in what happened to the children as to why they were being chased by this bumbling Aryan jeweller. And as I think he was the least realised character in the whole book. Having said that, the scenes when those of the characters that do come together, finally do come together, of which he is one towards the end of the book, were, I found them so compelling. Like normally when I get to the end of the book, I've lost interest in the whole thing. I can't be bothered to read the last few pages because I'm not particularly driven by plot. I'm driven by the desire to do other things apart from finish the book, like maybe have a drink or something like that. But in this case, no. Those scenes, and indeed the imagined future, as if the rest of it hadn't been imagined, really kept me going till the last page, and I was astonished that I finished it at all.
And
finished
you
it so
are with
quickly.
the Better Reading Book Club.
Yeah,
And we are
absolutely.
discussing All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr.
And this is Toni Jordan. This is Cheryl Arkle.
This is Cheryl Arkle.
And this is Mark
Dapin.
Dapin.
That's right. And
Our names are often pronounced wrongly, but not Toni Jordan.
not Toni Jordan. Mine is Cheryl Arkle, and Mark Dapin can be What was the pronunciation?
Dapin,
Dapin,
Max
Dapin.
Dupin sometimes.
Okay, all right. So we've got another comment or question from a reader.
Dawn and Bianca both think this will become a classic. What do you guys think?
I think it is a classic. I think well and truly. And I think it's a classic for lots of reasons, but one of the things I want to talk about, what struck me is the layers of storytelling, like hearing a story, the whole radio experience. I thought was, really important in terms of plot and in terms of storyline.
Yep.
But the narrators, so you've got story on so many levels.
Yep.
You've got the storytellers talking about the story. And I thought, to me, do you know, the sound of the radio, the sound of transmitters, the sound of story and music on radio was very nostalgic and made me just see the beauty in the book, which often, it wasn't so beautiful, was it?
Yeah. I really loved the bits that are from Marie's perspective, have all the sounds there. I loved that a lot. There was don't think that I didn't like it, because a lot of it I really liked, especially the bits where Werner is at at Hitler Youth Camp, school. Like, I found that absolutely gripping. I just felt like you don't have to earn your empathy for these characters. Like, the very first thing you see about Marie, she's 16, she's blind, she's all alone in this house. Bombers are going to come and flatten the whole town, and they've dropped these leaflets saying, inhabitants, get out of town, and she can't read them. She's all alone, and all she can do is sniff the paper because she's got no idea what it sees. And this immediate sense of peril absolutely works to pull you into the book. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I feel like it's a bit unearned. It's a bit easy.
Do you know, for me, it was the nuance of day-to-day life in war. Like, when I picked it up, I thought, oh, really? Can I do another historical World War II fiction book? Can I do it? And I thought, you know what, our readers have loved it, I'm going to give it a go. But it wasn't that. It was more than that. It was about personal experiences in war. Like, Werner is a German soldier, but he is so young and naive in a sense, and it was his own personal story. I love the relationship with his sister.
Absolutely.
I just loved it. And in terms of storytelling, she said so little in those letters, but you knew exactly what she thought of him. And I think that's master storytelling. I mean, I'm not a writer, I'm only a reader. But to me, I thought, wow, in so few words, I really got a sense of her. And I got a sense of her worry, but also her frustration of him and what is he doing, what atrocities. She wasn't naive at all. No. She knew that.
And in fact, she was so wise. She was completely all over what he was like.
But in just a few words in those letters that they had to each other, I thought was beautiful. And I really liked that. I really, really enjoyed the father and daughter relationship. Oh, yeah. I mean, Marie and her father was just absolutely gorgeous. But I did, and this is an observation, and I know you're a father, but very often I talk about the loss of a father is deeply, deeply sad, but the loss of a mother changes your life entirely. But what came out in this book too was that he was making her life interesting. He was giving her the Jules Verne book. Beautiful. He was teaching her, he was building the beautiful model of the city. And I wondered if it was the mother, it then just becomes about survival. The mother, and you don't get that when it's a single father-child relationship. Anyway, that makes for good storytelling, I thought. But I thought it would have been very different if it was the mother. But I love them. And also food. I thought food, obviously Anthony Doerr does like food, because that whole relationship with food, when he's writing her letters from his prison camp, of which there would have been no food or just slush, but he's making up feasts that he's eating. Gosh, that made me cry. I thought that was so beautiful, because it's so sensual in a way. It kind of, it excites everything in you, food does. The smell, the flavour, the vision, everything is beautiful. And I thought that was the greatest gift he was giving her.
Yeah, the food was beautifully described all the way through. Whenever anybody ate something, you could taste it.
What about the peaches in the air?
Yeah.
It was beautiful. Hang on, we're going to
I did misread that as fish to start with. It doesn't sound that nice to me, this old tin of fish, man.
No, it wouldn't have smelled so good. We're just going to take a comment from another reader.
Angela comments that Doerr brings a lot of natural science into his writing.
Oh yes, I
What do
love
you guys
that.
think of that?
I loved that. I loved all the sea mollusks and shells, and I loved all that.
And the whole presence of the sea
Yeah,
was
beautiful.
just fantastic. Now, I'm Cheryl Arkle. This is Better Reading Book Club. I'm talking to the lovely Toni Jordan
And the lovely.
and the
They're very lovely.
and the not
Very
so lovely
lovely.
Mark Dapin.
The lovelier, if anything, Mark Dapin.
And we're talking about Anthony Doerr, All the Light We Cannot See. Okay, all right, we've got to whiz through. We're going to take another comment.
Leanne says she liked the short chapters as it was a big book, but I felt as I was taking little bites and wanted more and more.
Now, as writers, I don't know what that technique is, but for me, it made me flick through the book a lot faster. Is that what that technique does with short chapters?
I don't know. I've very rarely read a book with so many short chapters. And I haven't gone through these reading many books about the Second World War, novels set in the Second World War, so it was fairly new to me, the whole background even. But it did, as somebody who does not normally read contemporary fiction, it did make me feel like I was making greater headway than I thought I would when I began to read it.
Yeah.
But I was going to say I was going to disagree with you, not simply for the sake of disagreeing with you,
No.
although partly for that. About Jutta, I didn't get any feel for her character at all. Again,
Really? I
I
liked
felt
her.
the book didn't need her. I mean, I understand everything that you were saying, but it didn't particularly work for me. And again, what you're saying, Toni, about the lovely Toni, about immediately empathising with Marie, I was unable to do that because I was still angry that it was in the present tense during those pages. So she had to prove herself a little more to me for that reason.
Oh, right. So I really like that relationship between brother and sister. I want to talk about one other relationship, Frederick. Broke my heart. What do we think about Frederick?
I liked Frederick, apart from right at the end, when does Frederick
Oh, yeah, I
come
didn't like
back?
that. I did not
that
like
was a
that.
step too far.
Yep.
I'm willing him not to do that. I'm willing him not to
Me
have
too.
Frederick speak, even though I kind of really wanted him to in my
But,
heart.
but did you not feel that was like him twisting the plot in order to get the reader the response that he wanted?
At that stage,
that didn't work
it
for me
did,
at all.
yeah. But I thought he was a very good character. I thought those military school scenes were compelling.
Me too.
But I think Werner going to the house of Frederick, like his home and meeting his parents, I mean, being an orphan and then walking into this absolute environment that
was
would have
great.
been so alien to him, to have maids, to have the mother, to have all that affluence. I thought, oh my God, that really for me just balanced out. The rich and the poor and how people suffered at all levels. Like even those rich Germans sacrificed their son
Absolutely.
to this war.
Yeah.
Do you know what I also want to talk about? The weather. It was just winter the whole time. In the 4 years, it was freezing cold. Why don't we ever get a sense of summer?
Like I say, I didn't notice that.
You didn't notice
the
that it was
weather, no.
cold all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh.
And it was uncomfortably cold all the time. And
Now
I
you
was
say it.
shivering all the time. Does that make for really a harder plot? Anyway, we've got another comment.
Bianca says, I loved how music, science and reading brought together two people who were basically enemies.
Yeah,
That's very nice.
that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
they were enemies, but were they in a way? I mean, they were meant to be enemies, but I think he fell in love with her very early on, didn't he? Do you know what I also loved about radio, music, messages, like when they were when they were in St. Malma and they were delivering delivering messages, right, to each other, and key messages about where the Germans are and what's happening, really important. What do you call that? Whatever it is,
Counter-insurgency.
But within that, and I really love this, I don't know if you did, but they were they threw in a little bit of gossip.
Yeah,
know?
but it
Didn't you love
wasn't
that?
just-
That Tony's daughter just had a baby,
But
and
it wasn't
well,
just
so and so got
gossip.
married to so and
No,
so.
it wasn't just gossip.
It's community.
It was taking such a risk with their lives to keep the connections between people going.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was community, and I think that too brought I think that that's where he was a master storyteller in terms of bringing in just real life into a war environment. That for me was really quite beautiful. I love little touches like that.
I think it was insurgency rather than counterinsurgency.
Oh, okay.
Okay, right.
You're quite
Insurgency, thank you. Did you like that touch?
It kind of. I would have if I was a bit more perceptive, but I was thinking. I was never certain whether it was things that were really happening or whether it was in fact coded messages.
Yeah.
But now I realise that I was wrong. But both Mark the Reader... Oh no, Mark the Reader was wrong. Mark the Writer took a kind of step
But
back.
you know, because for me, it kind of told me a little bit more about community and how people, even in adversity, need to survive. And in a way, they were storytelling themselves by telling each other, little, giving each other little messages.
The books that Marie got, the Braille books of Jules Verne and those other ones, were just crucial to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a really way that she could feel the world outside of her very narrow experience.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting as well the way that she was actually feeling the stories, the way the stories were in Braille. And he really, really brought that out very well. The feeling of what reading in Braille must be like.
Yeah, very, very hard. Now, there were a couple of people who actually didn't like the book. And Samantha, I would not deny that the writing is beautiful and that the descriptive passages are vivid, but I didn't like this book. As a whole, it was flat and unsatisfying. I wouldn't have described it as flat, but, all opinions are good opinions, and thank you, Samantha. Carly, I found it dull and felt like nothing really happened with a predictable ending. Rebecca, tried to read this book 3 times and just can't get into it. I think I have another go myself, but anyway. And Georgina found it really boring and only read 30% of the book. So I guess there's a little bit of something for everybody, and everybody has their own taste. It has been an international bestseller.
Absolutely.
We're going to take another comment from a reader.
Denise says she loved it so much she's going to go visit St Marlow.
Wow! Isn't that well, you're very lucky, Denise.
No, it's great. Like, that's one of the best parts of literature, that you feel like you've been somewhere and then you want to see it for real. It's beautiful.
It's really beautiful. All right, well, anybody else would like to add anything to this?
Well, yes. Look, I did love it, but with some reservations.
All right. All the Light We Cannot See, Anthony Doerr.
I would say, as writer Mark, it was just an extraordinarily satisfying experience bathing in the words of writer Anthony Doerr. I might even now read another book this year.
There we go.
If you want me to talk about it on TV.
You'll only read it if we ask you to.
Or if I have to review it.
Oh, right, okay. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what we're going to talk about next time, book club. So this is Better Reading Book Club. I've got Toni Jordan, I've got Mark Dapin, and we have been talking about All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Every month we meet, the last Wednesday of every month, and we talk about a book club book. And next month we're talking about Out of the Ice by Anne Turner. Now, this is Anne's second book. She's an Australian writer. She's also an Australian filmmaker. And we're going to be talking about Out of the Ice. So everybody, get yourself a copy, borrow it, buy it, don't steal it. Have a read and join us next month for book club. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for
You've
asking
been
me,
very
Cheryl.
well behaved, Mark Dapin.
Thank you.
I am so impressed.
I did sit on your dog.
You did sit on my dog. But he's okay and he's still alive, so don't worry about that. Thank you to the lovely Toni Jordan.
Thank you, lovely Cheryl.
Toni, you're still travelling around the country.
I am.
Talking about your wonderful book,
Thank you.
Our Tiny Useless Hearts. If you haven't read it, read it. He is still talking. Well, are you going around the country?
I am really, but I haven't brought it with me. All right, I haven't
He
brought
forgot
with
to
my
bring
book
his book with
R&R
him
me.
tonight. But he is a great writer. Look at
great
him up.
writer.
Great
Yeah.
journo, great writer, Mark Dapin. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was a great conversation. Please join us again in July, the last Wednesday of July, where we're going to be talking about Out of the Ice by Anne Turner. Fantastic. Thank you again and see you next time.
Thank you.